It was like we were zombie-eating mass murderers. We're sitting there just dripping with sweat and have to wear a mask when there's nobody else there. And we're in the same clothes, though I have washed them, since Christmas Day when I left. No, you still have to wear a mask, and it doesn't protect anybody, and you can still catch COVID, as we know, and you can still spread it, as we know. Some of the players just cannot handle bubble after bubble after bubble. There's going to be some casualties. There's no doubts about it. There's quite a lot of depression. We're getting complete mixed messages from the governing bodies. You cannot speak your mind. You're regarded as an anti-vaxxer or a this or a that or a COVID denier or whatever. I mean, this is going to get some common sense here. And she said that there's going to be a COVID generation. She said this is a disaster. I think in time we'll see how damaging the lockdowns have been.
Hello, and welcome to Sketch Notes on a Pandemic. I'm Lucy Johnston, Health and Social Affairs Editor of the Sunday Express. Today we're very excited to welcome Pat Cash, who'll be interviewed by Matt Gibson. We've got plenty more guests coming up, so if you'd like to watch, please like and subscribe so you can be among the first to watch them.
Okay, well, we're joined today by tennis legend Pat Cash to talk about the very real effect the pandemic has had on professional sport. Pat probably needs no introduction, but I should say he reached a career high of number 4 in the world, reached 2 Australian Open finals, and of course, to listeners here in the UK, most memorably won Wimbledon in 1987. Now a coach on the Pro Tour, he trains Chinese star Qiang Wang, and he's currently in Rome for the clay court swing. So thanks so much for joining us, Pat. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Yeah, and thanks for having me.
Now, we were hoping to speak about, as I say, the effects, particularly to start with, on the players. It's fair to say it's been a very unusual 15 months. I think with Indian Wells cancelled with a day's notice. Since then, there was a gap of a few months, a few exhibition matches here and there.
Yeah.
It started again in August, but I suspect it was a very, very different tour you went back to. Hotels, restrictions, no crowds, testing, the bubble, they call it. And I just wondered, could you talk us through what it's been like as a coach and for the players in the bubble, what it's been like day by day and how hard it's been?
Gee, look, there's a whole bunch of different stories going on. Depends on who you talk to and what player you're working with, or if you're a pro player. Obviously, some of them have decided to step out for the year last year. Ashley Barty, who was current number 1 woman player, she decided to have a break. She just got to number 1, of course, and finished off the year in pretty good style, and then this all sort of came down. But so a player like Nick Kyrgios, another Australian, decided and has still not appeared on the circuit other than a couple of tournaments in Australia. He'll have his own reasons for that, but basically everybody else is, and including Ash, is back on the tour. I think initially, like everybody, we didn't really know what was going on. We didn't know what was going on. We knew the tournaments were getting cancelled. The big one was Wimbledon, of course. When Wimbledon got cancelled, we all just went, "Whoa! This is pretty serious stuff." And me personally, because I do a lot of work commentating and having living in the UK myself, that was a big one for us. And at that stage last year, I was working with a young American player, but I managed to get, ironically, get over to the US. I've got a US passport, so I went over there. I went backwards and forwards over those few months. Backwards and forwards to California and London. I was in basically the 2 hot spots of COVID. To empty planes. There wasn't any food. There was some biscuits and crisps, and that's about it. And there was about 10 people or so on these jumbo jets. I was flying backwards and forwards. Literally, I mean, one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life was going into LAX International Airport, coming back to London. And I took a video, but there was literally nobody there. There was one security guy there, and there's one guy in front of me. It was like an apocalypse thing. It was the strangest thing. So I personally didn't have any fear whatsoever. I'm pretty health conscious, and I had an idea of what was happening. So I just I just went on. I just carried on, and I saw all the panic and everything going around me. But but then the tournament started up again. No umpires, no ball boys, so the exhibition matches that you mentioned, and then bit by bit, the US Open tour decided they needed to go, because the reason they needed to go is that if they didn't have the US Open, everybody in the USTA, US Tennis Association, almost everybody would have lost their jobs, and that's hundreds and hundreds of people. And they were at the stage where we've got to have this. At least we've got TV rights. We're not going to have crowds, but at least we're going to have TV rights. We're going to have some sponsors, and we don't want everybody else is losing their jobs. We don't want to be losing our jobs. There'll be a handful of us left. A lot of the coaches were losing their jobs, the guys that were working with younger players, because they couldn't get to the national tennis centers or do any of that sort of stuff. So it was very, very strange, very sad to see a lot of coaches and a lot of players and younger players, because all the tournaments stopped, other than the big ones. I mean, these big tournaments stopped, or the little exhibition tournaments where really nobody turned up to. So many people were losing their jobs, and the ones on the fringes. And we know the big tennis players, they can afford to have several years out when they're out to worry about their money. But we as things came in, we ended up in the bubbles, the US Open, and all the tournaments played in New York, the 2 tournaments there, and testing every few days and quarantining, and you're not allowed out. And we couldn't go to restaurants, and that's been the way ever since, really, other than Australia, which was once we finally got through the quarantine, we could go out and have dinner. But the Premier decided to lock down because there was a few cases in the other side of town.
I remember.
Just as we got out, we were locked down again.
It was after the Curious match, wasn't it? I think team beating Curious. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. They at 11 o'clock, the curfew, that was it, and everybody closed down. Yeah, something. Yeah,
it went on. Just back to the US then, do you think it was a brave decision for them to push ahead with it? I mean, as you say, there were jobs on the line, which gives I suppose, a financial incentive. But I think there's also a degree of bravery to say, actually, we can hold a tennis tournament in this. And I think they proved it did. It was a success, I think, with the US Open, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Very strange not having anybody there. Kind of nice for us coaches and players, because we get practice courts and we weren't going to go around and through the crowds and all that sort of stuff. But very strange to be going on centre court for a semi-final match or a big match to have literally 5 people in the stadium of 20,000. So it was strange, but you got to realise that players play, unless you're Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, where it doesn't matter where you go on a tennis court, people are going to be stopping watching, or Serena Williams. But 90% of our careers are on practice courts with nobody watching. So a lot of the commentators are saying, they're not going to be able to get nervous. A crowd might get into it, that the players won't get nervous, and then it'll detract. It didn't detract from anything. We saw players get so nervous because, as I said, they play 90% of the time and they know what's on the line, and they were playing almost for their careers because they realised, I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen here. It might be the last time I ever get the chance to play the US Open, or it was just so many unknowns that we just loved the fact that US put the tournament on, showed bravery. Obviously, there was a lot of precautions, and they were very, very, very careful. I had many discussions, quite a couple of really interesting discussions with the US Open doctor there about all sorts of protocols and stuff like that, which, they were, for us coaches, they were, making us wear masks.
Of course, yeah.
An empty stadium, is stinking heat in New York. It's, it can get to 36, 37 degrees and humidity. We're sitting there just dripping with sweat and have to wear a mask when there's nobody else there. And, they made some common sense decisions and said, look, that's ridiculous. We don't need that. So, but they also very clear said, look, if there's an outbreak, the city of New York will just shut the whole tournament down.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. He said, look, if there's an outbreak, they'll just shut the whole tournament down. And so we were all like, oh, okay, we'll be extra safe.
Sure. So everyone's on edge anyway, I guess.
Everybody's on the edge. And what was weird is that we were all in the same hotel. So in a funny way, the teams were kind of bonding. There was and most of the players and the coaches, most of the coaches get on pretty well with each other. We've been on the circuit, we've been there, done that, and the players, get on. Of course, you're never going to be best friends with every player, and there's players you don't like, but we're all sort of stuck in the hotel, and there wasn't any what I call extra player support team members. So there was a coach and the player. And maybe the physio. There wasn't the mum, the dad, and the uncle, and the sister, and that just fills up the whole, and makes it really awkward actually to be in a big tournament. And that's the worst thing about it. The great thing about the big tournaments is there's lots of crowds. It's exciting. You get support. The worst thing is that there's just so many people. You can't get to the lunchroom. You can't get to the practice desk. You can't book a car. It's just like, who are these people? And they're all family members or whatever. So that was the good side of it. But obviously we didn't have the crowds, and of course we're getting pay cuts. Well, the players are getting pay cuts now. All of them, massive pay cuts.
I'm going to come to prize money in a sec, actually. But I should ask: any unlikely friendships formed? Any rivalries, or people who maybe didn't get on suddenly found after New York? Oh, actually, they're not so bad. Or is that?
Well, I pretty much get on with everybody anyway. But you tend to have to. But in many ways, we're all sort of pitching together. I mean, you'd never be sitting on a bus going with a whole bunch of people, and we're all just there and patient and friendly and in the line. And if you have to go on the line for your test, you're patient and people were polite, and everybody was, it was actually quite a nice, because we were sort of pulling together. We really wanted this to happen. We said, okay, let's make sure that this goes ahead, because otherwise everything is going to go fall to pieces. Yeah. And I think we're very grateful that it happened, as we were, in Australia and these tournaments that are happening at the moment. Though it's not a lot of fun.
I was going to say, what's the hardest part of it? Would you say, if there was one thing?
Seeing the same people all the time, and so you had breakfast, you see the same people. You get in the bus or in the car, you see the same people. You go to the tennis, you see the same people. You go back to the hotel and eat at the restaurant at the hotel, or they provide something. Same people. There's no freedom whatsoever, and you cannot step out. Though Rome is different. This is the first time where we can actually go outside for an hour, walk or exercise. So I've been lucky enough. I love Rome, so I've been actually running around the city.
Good city.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. It's like, wow, I'm really enjoying it. But generally speaking, you have no, you're literally looking across the road at an Italian restaurant or whatever, and think, I just want to go in there and get a bit of coffee or something to eat or a snack, and no, you cannot even go in there. And they warned us this week. They said there's an ice cream shop there around the corner, and they said you cannot go into that ice cream shop. And they actually, I believe they put a security guard there.
I was going to say, I think in Madrid they had guards outside the hotel, didn't they? I wasn't sure if that was...
Yeah, they had. I'm not sure whether I'm not sure whether that was for making sure that whether the players would keep them in or for other people coming out. I don't know, but it was either way. These hotels are literally tennis hotels. Yeah. So you can imagine the hospitality industry is absolutely dying around the world, and all of a sudden, we call up, as in the tennis tour, and call up and go, hey, we'd like to book out your whole hotel for a week. What do you need? We'll put whatever you want. Well, I need security. We need some food downstairs. The players can't leave. We'll fill out the whole hotel. And they're like, yeah, great. So it's been great for them. A lot of these hotels are actually getting some business where they wouldn't normally.
Which I suppose shows the value of the tour, actually, is, and why it's going and more jobs into it. Yeah.
And we are probably the golfers are the same, but we're the only touring, sporting events, I suppose. Most of them are national, like the English League or whatever, American basketball. They're all in bubbles and they can move around in their own country, but we're traveling internationally. So, these forms here, I've got health forms and declarations that you have to do every single week, and I'm going nuts because my player's Chinese, so she got some visa issues to here and there.
Yeah.
And of course they want to know where you've been this week, where you were last week, where you've been the 2 weeks before that, and all this sort of stuff. And if you get it wrong on your passport and they come and they have a look at that, say, sorry, you got it wrong here. They go, I can't tell you. I've literally lost track of how many nights that we've had emergencies at the airport or had to go back to a hotel over this last 4 months. I think it's probably about 10 nights that we've been stranded.
Just the paperwork or
due to paperwork, visas just expired, or the health declaration wasn't there, or we wanted to fly through from America to Europe via Switzerland via Zurich, and they said no, unless you're a resident, which I'm a UK resident, but she wasn't, so you can't even transit, can't even go in the airport. So we kicked off that night. We had to rebook, go through Frankfurt. So, we have to be just very patient. I mean, really patient, and it's tough, really tough for the Chinese girls the Chinese players. They're mainly all girls. There's hardly any men players, but they've been, other than one of them, they've been locked in away all last year. So they didn't get any tennis whatsoever. And the tour has been going. Obviously, we missed a few months, Wimbledon, all that sort of stuff, but the tour's been going. So they've come back into it now this year. It's almost like jumping on a speeding treadmill. Yeah. And they're just falling all over the place. So there's there's few of them. As I said, everybody's got a sort of different story, but the Chinese players have certainly, having been locked away, had probably the worst scenario. And so as a coach, I'm dealing with that as well.
Yeah. And Chiang had a fabulous result, didn't she, at the last Australian Open? I think, was that when she beat Serena? Was that the last?
Yeah, that's right. She was in red hot form. She beat Dash Barty at US Open, and she beat Serena earlier in the year, and she got her ranking up to she was 12 in the world. She dropped about 25 when I started with her, and it's been it's weird that they've adjusted the ranking system, so she's a lot of these points are falling off as she's trying to get back into form. So it's a lot of pressure on her, and obviously coming into the Olympics, and that's a big thing for her, and being selected and all that. As I said, there's lots of stories. Everybody's got a story of something happening somewhere.
Sure. But you've managed to overcome it, which is quite impressive, really. So.
Well, we're trying. We're trying our best. So she's getting her game back together. And, when you're out for a year, it's like being injured out for a year. It's going to take several months, half a year to get back to form. And that's the case with her at the moment. So she's didn't have a great result yesterday, lost yesterday, but played pretty well. So it's not far away.
Yeah.
But the other Chinese girls I think she's won the most matches. I think she's won 5 this year, or 4 or 5. I think one of the other players has won 2. The rest of them have lost everything. So, they'll get it back.
Sure. And you mentioned earlier prize money and younger players, and this was just something I wanted to mention. Prize money's been slashed. Gate receipts are down. I mean, it is understandable. I think there's also a reaction that you sometimes get, I'm sure you've heard it, where the public might say, well, millionaire, famous sports stars, what does it matter if they've only got 50%? I think clearly that misses the point with the majority of the players, I suspect. It's very expensive being out there. You have your whole team, you have the hotels, you have the travel, all of these things. And also, just to take you back to something you said after you won Wimbledon, where people said that you made all that money in a few hours, and you said, no, that took my whole life. And I think then you worked it out at the training, the matches you'd played, and I think it came to about 20p an hour. And this was a Grand Slam winner in a non-COVID time. So all things considered, do you think it may become just not worth it for some of the lower ranked players? Will they simply just not be able to afford to continue?
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubts. I think, we know that the tennis is very top heavy, and I think that's one of the big issues with tennis, and that's one of the reasons why there's talk about a breakaway players union with the men. They're saying, well, look, tennis is one of the very few sports that has no money going through it. It's all basically in the top players. And they say, well, they're the ones we want to watch. We want to watch Federer, we want to watch Nadal, we want to watch Djokovic and Serena. And, why should the tournaments be paying money to watch a number 5 Chinese girl? That's the way of the tour. So, but yeah, I mean, if you can't make money, you're going to have to reconsider your career. And I think one of the most troubling thing is the young players that are trying to come up and trying to play. We understand that we've got some tournaments, but lesser ones where the players start off their careers, but they've been slashed. Certainly in the women's, big time. Some of the men's have hung in there, but even the younger players, they can't. There's no tournaments to play. So he got an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, finished school, wants to try and have a go at a career. It's on the family payroll. They're paying for and they're sitting at home going, well, you still got to pay the tennis coach, you still got to pay the tennis club, but there's no chance of him going out and playing. So I really do feel really sorry for the young players and the players that have been injured and coming back. And so it's not. It's still at the top. The players are making some good money, but it's a real battle. It's a real battle. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at the end. It's going to be some casualties. There's no doubts about it. There's quite a lot of depression around the players. I mean, I'm mainly on the women's circuit, but talking to one of the coaches, they said they can't handle. Some of the players just cannot handle bubble after bubble after bubble, test after test, and going from week to week and not being able to see anybody. I've been personally on the road since Christmas Day, and my player Chiang, if she goes back to China, she's got a month quarantine. Or 3 weeks actually. They've reduced it now. So I live in London, but I can't go back because nobody. When you come from the UK, nobody wants you. So you can't come. I can't come back. I got to go. If I come to Italy or France or wherever, I've got to quarantine for 10 days, and that's the tournament's over by then. Yeah. So I have literally been. I'm wearing the same clothes, though I have washed them since Christmas Day when I left on the road. So I've been to Australia and I've been everywhere else. It can be tricky though. Though I'm actually very happy that we're out there doing something. I couldn't stand the lockdown in the UK. It literally drove me nuts. I had a couple of months of it. That was enough.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you for one sec. But on the players, actually, I was going to ask, how do you think it's affected the players? It's physically training, I guess, has been affected to a degree, but has it taken a toll out of them mentally? Do you think there could be a long-term mental health damage to some of these players?
I would say definitely. Definitely some players have, I know one of the Chinese girls says, I'm going to play 2 more tournaments, I'm going home, I'm done. I can't handle it anymore. So, that's her career. She's ranked about 70 in the world. She might be very, very lucky to save her career. And if she does well, if China opens up at the end, she might play a few tournaments at the end of the year. But she could, just too tough for her. And it's no fun when you're not winning and you're playing against other players who are red hot. And as I said, you're jumping on a speeding treadmill. So, and players are trying to go home for a little break. And now it's starting to, hopefully it's starting to ease back. But we're getting a lot of mixed messages too from the governing bodies of tennis. They're pushing very hard for the vaccine, saying vaccine is the solution. Though if you do get vaccinated, we're not going to give you any privileges whatsoever. So most of the women players have been getting vaccinated quite a bit. The men, I don't know any of them. A couple of the men have, and I know. One of the men have been had a bad reaction, got a blood clot, and I think that's scared off a lot of the guys.
Oh, really?
But they're saying, what we'll do is we'll let you have free time if you got vaccinated, blah blah blah, all this sort of stuff. But of course, in the same breath, they're saying, no, you still have to wear a mask, and it doesn't protect anybody, and you can still catch COVID as we know, and you can still spread it as we know, even though you've been vaccinated. And so we're going, well, okay, what do we do? And then you've got to stay in the bubble. Oh, no, you can go out for an hour or 2 hours for a walk. And then the ATP now are opening up and saying, well, we'll test you every 2 days and you can do what you want. So that makes sense. That's the latest thing.
That's the latest protocol. So that should give you a bit.
I don't know if that's official yet, but it's going to happen anyway the next day, next week or so. So yeah, test it every 2 days. If you don't mind that, then you can go out. And we've had very, very few, no spread whatsoever. We had quite a few players have tested positive, but it hasn't spread even to the coaches. And that's quite a phenomenon. I think it'll be studied at some stage and say, okay, well, young, healthy people, just recover very quickly, or they don't spread it, or whatever it happens to be.
Well, we did see it the Adria Tour, didn't we? Where Djokovic, I think, Dimitrov, a couple of the others caught it. Interesting. I think Dimitrov still perhaps as I said, that there's still a few after effects, but I think for most of them, they were back and playing within a couple of weeks, weren't they? So
they all were. But sure, I think they made the mistake of going to a nightclub and a sweaty hot night,
of course,
and dancing around. And there's no nightclubs open anyway if you wanted to. So I think player a bit more. We're like everybody, are a bit more aware of what's going on and just being sensible.
Sure. And in terms of player reaction, I think it's been taken in great grace by and large. But I've sensed, it may just be me, but I've sensed just from some of the speeches perhaps and the way it's come across, there is a bit of discord under the surface that perhaps people aren't aware of the difficulties that you're all having to live under. And Benoit Paire recently, quite well reported, he said, "Frankly, I don't give a damn about this game. Playing in such a cemetery is no longer possible. All the players think so. I may be the only one to say it." And he's actually been dropped from the French Olympic team, maybe not because of that comment, but his behaviour this season. But do you think that's true about the mood amongst many of the players, that they all do think this isn't quite right, but we're just not willing to say it? Or do you think that's something perhaps unique to Benoit and a couple of them?
Well, I think he's probably speaking out of turn a little bit there. But having said that, I don't think the players can handle much more of it, of the real hard lockdown. They really can't. And the bubble after bubble after bubble after bubble, and you can say, well, that's part of life. Other teams do other football teams and do that around the world, and basketball teams. Yeah, that's teams. You've got your 20 mates there, or your 15 mates, or whatever, and your coaches and hang out. It's you and your coach, and maybe a physio, and everybody else is the opponent. Everybody else is the enemy. I mean, you get along, but it's not like it's a super friendly atmosphere. Yeah. Though we get along. So it's slightly different. You have your mates around you where you don't have your mates around you here. And as I said, I've been able to see my partner, my life partner, not my business partner, for 10 days since Christmas. And that was lucky. She managed to come in. So it's tough on me. It's tough on the Chinese girl that I was telling you about who's quit. She just got married, so she's actually can't handle this anymore. So I don't think the players can handle too much more of it. And I think that's why they're starting to ease back restrictions. But they're tied. Their hands are tied by the government and the government rules. But the players are very health conscious. They're very, very aware. All the talk is around. And as I said, we're getting complete mixed messages from the governing bodies. Yes, this is the way to do it. We're going to need to vaccinate, and then the players are going, well, wait a minute. We are at such a low risk. Why should we get vaccinated by an experimental vaccine? Can we wait till till the researchers come in a year or so, and then we can discuss it? No, we want you to get vaccinated, but it's up to you. It's your choice. And if you do, we'll give you some favors. Yeah. So, wait a minute. Anyway, I don't want to get into that too much, but what it does is it creates this tension all the time with what can I do? And it happened today. Well, what can you do? We're going to get on a bus and travel to the next tournament. Okay, what does that mean? Well, we have to have a test before you go on the bus, and then you have to have a test when you arrive at the next tournament. So, wait a minute, it's the same day. Yeah, but that's a different district. So, we need a test there. And they go, no, we don't need it on the bus now. As long as we had it within 5 days, you don't need it on the bus. They literally, it's still it's still going, still working it out. And, we have to be flexible and accept that, that everybody's doing their best.
And a positive test would mean out of the tournament, presumably.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And probably you and your team member. And also if you break protocol, then you get out of the tournament. Yeah. The player gets out of the tournament. They get their prize money deducted, and you get a fine. I don't think that's happened yet, but it's pretty severe. I mean, especially when there's not the prize money isn't that high at the moment, and you get a lot of expenses. So where it's interesting times. I'm in a funny way. I'm quite enjoying it because it's a challenge. Yeah, this is what I got into coaching for. But it's also I've got grey hairs now, but I didn't have them a few months ago.
Well, I was actually just going to take you back to Australia in Melbourne, which was again a great tournament, but also particularly tough one, I think, for players outside Australia. There was obviously the distance travelled, very strict quarantine laws. As you said, the plus side was you were then able to be out when you were there. But I think some of them spent 14 days without training, the ones who'd been possibly exposed when playing. And back to speaking out, actually, Novak Djokovic made an effort to say perhaps you could do a bit more for those players in quarantine, and he was called a tool. And then later, I think they were accused of behaving like pork chops, where you stepped in and said, "Hang on a sec." Was it difficult? Did it feel difficult to speak out? Was there a backlash against anyone who did suggest that perhaps this was a bit over the top?
Of course, it's difficult to speak out. You cannot speak your mind. You're regarded as an anti-vaxxer or a this or a that or a COVID denier or whatever. I mean, let's just get some common sense here. We're talking about some of the most elite athletes in the world. All what they're down with for a tournament in Australia or anywhere else for that matter. Super health conscious people. You know, I would argue that the tennis players probably know more about COVID than half the doctors we see on TV. Melbourne was particularly tricky because there was some of the players or people on the plane. I think there was a airline attendant, one coach on another plane, and so it was 3 planes that basically were. And what they'd done, what the Tennis Australia made up, they'd hired planes to bring people in. The Australian government had put a restriction on how many people can come into the country. Now, all the Australians thought, wait a minute, we're flying these players in, 1,000 players. I'm still trying to get back to Australia to see my mum who's sick, right? And then so the reaction was really bad, but they didn't understand that this was separate to the let's say normal people, without saying cruel, but this was specifically they put Australian Open on. And they invited the Australian players, but the Tennis Australia had to pay for everything. So we all separated. We were on different cabins. It was like 20 people in one cabin, 20 people in another cabin. So it was only like 60 people on the whole plane. And the idea was to block the cabins off. If somebody got COVID in that cabin, that part of the cabin, they'd block it off and they were, okay, you guys are locked down. Sorry about that. But the rest of the plane is fine. Well, that wasn't the case. The authorities went, nah, the whole plane's locked down. So these people who were down the back or wherever, nowhere near the coach that was sick, had been locked in the room for 2 weeks, and there's no fresh air. For some reason, mind-boggling reason, the Australian authorities thought that by having an open window, COVID could fly out the window and go back in your neighbour. And I mean, it's insanity, some of the things. But again, we didn't know a lot about, we're learning more and more. I think that's clearly a misconception now, and it won't happen next time. But the policy in Australia is such, and that's the way it is. And some people think it's great, and we're going ahead. Other people say, well, you got to open up at some stage, which is my belief. The Australian Open will be in the same situation next year for sure. Next year's Australian Open will have to come in and quarantine for 2 weeks, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it in 2013. As well, the same situation, and I think there'll be quite a lot of players who won't go this year.
Yeah,
I think they're the risk of having to be locked down. And we were in soft lockdown, as I call it. So we could go play tennis. We'd go out for 5 hours, and we were like, it was like we were zombie eating mass murderers. So, as soon as we stepped out of the door, there was a security guy there. Walk this way, right? Press the button. Empty lift, straight down. As soon as you got out there, guys in hazmats, right? Yeah, off you go, straight into that car. Don't go in that car. No other cars. Straight in. Guys covered in plastic sheets and everything. It's like, jeepers, what did we do? But that was something we would accept. And then after 2 weeks, I could go and see my mum, which was great. So I could see her for a couple of times until Premier decided to lock down again, which sucked. But anyway.
Did you find that with the public when you were out there, when you were out of quarantine, there was perhaps a perception in the media over here that it wasn't strong. I mean, the crowds were fantastic, as I said, but there was a perception that perhaps the players weren't as welcome as they might have been, and perhaps people weren't desperately keen to have the tournament going ahead. Did you get that sense as a coach, or did the players get that sense from a public rather than the powers that be?
I think so initially, but I think once people understood that we weren't taking up those spots for people coming back into the country, but they had an extremely hard lockdown in Victoria, and as my mate said to me, he said, yeah, he knows I'm quite outspoken about several things. He says, Pat, just keep your mouth shut. You got to understand, nobody wants you guys here because one outbreak and they're locked down for another month, and they've been ridiculously hard lockdown over 200-300 deaths or cases or whatever, and now one case and they're going to lock down. They don't want you here. If you bring it in, they don't want you. That's the end of it. We're back lockdown. Yeah. I'm like, okay, so, and don't say anything about it. I know it's stupid, but don't say anything about it. I'm like, because you'll just lose. Everybody will hate you. Well, of course, I didn't keep my mouth shut because I wanted to say, well, wait a minute, we're here. We've been invited, guys. Yeah. We've been invited.
I think there was a sense of inviting the best players in the world to come over and play a tournament. I think the fans were hugely grateful they went ahead, and certainly from our living room, we're thinking this is great. But and they did an amazing job. I mean, it really was. I mean, the rules were strict and they didn't make sense, a lot of them, but we did it, and we were very happy to play the US Open, play the Australian Open, and French Open went on, and Wimbledon will go on this year. So that'll be fantastic. And just to go back and take it away, maybe from a pro tour for a sec. Obviously, the lockdowns, I can speak for the UK. We had harsh lockdown last year. We've had a very harsh one this year, and for a few months of that, sports, including tennis, golf, were made illegal in effect, and people simply couldn't play. You're a supporter of Tennis for Free, which is grassroots level sport, amateur tennis. A lot of that is beginning in the parks and young players starting. Do you think that could have a permanent effect on the future? Do you think perhaps there's an Andy Murray over here who didn't ever pick up a racket, or a kid who might just think, just in that window alone, or is that too much to read?
Oh, yeah. I think in time we'll see how damaging the lockdowns have been, personally, I mean, I've got this nice scar on my wrist. You probably can't see it, but in the light. But it's a carpal tunnel. I've got permanent damage in my fingers because I couldn't get in the hospital to get this carpal tunnel injury. So I've lost permanent feeling, and the surgeon. I'm not the only one. The surgeon said, "Well, I can't get you in," and then every week is more chance of you losing feeling in your fingers, and he was right. I mean, a lot of it's recovered, but I've also got a good mate of mine who's suffering from cancer, and he can't get in. Another good mate of mine needs a stint in his, and he's basically lying on the couch, can't do anything. We're the lucky one. I'm the lucky ones, but I think in time we'll see how damaging the lockdowns have been, and certainly health for young people and kids and that sort of stuff is going to be, and adults for that matter, is going to be one of them. But I don't want to get into what's right and what's wrong, but it's I think in time we'll see if this worked, if lockdowns worked, lockdowns worked, why are we still doing them? If lockdown didn't work, why are we still doing them? That's my sort of head scratcher. But I understand the point behind it, and we're all suffering it to some extent, unless you're a mask maker or Deliveroo or Amazon. So it's an interesting situation. But where young people's health is a major concern to me, and getting kids out into the park and getting to run around. As you said, the Tennis for Free is a great organisation where you look up Tennis for Free and you can find free tennis lessons and courts. It's amazing, and good coaches. So it's a great organisation, and obviously that's all stopped. But I don't know.
But more important than ever when we do come out the other side. But I suspect in the UK that's going to be for a bit at least this summer, and hopefully longer term. But it's more important than ever to get youngsters back up and fit and healthy. There's been a year of comparative inactivity, I think. I suspect people have been doing as much as they can, but it's been hard. And so I think, is there anything the sport of tennis can do to put more into it, encourage more people to get out and about?
Well, we're just trying to keep our heads floated at the moment. But look, I think hopefully I mean, charity stuff. I do a lot of charity. That's what's one of the charity, but the charities have suffered so much. I mean, goodness gracious! I know there was something in the news about the UK withdrawing the money from
the foreign aid side of it.
Yeah, foreign aid. I was going to say UNESCO or something like that.
Yeah,
of billions. I mean, is this causing billions of people to die? And I mean, yes, I suppose it is. I mean, and that's, I said, when it all washes up in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, we'll look back at this. The ones who are willing to take their head out of the sand and are willing to look and say, okay, let's have an objective look at this. I think we'll see what, if it was right or wrong. But
I think
it's been tough. I hate to be a teenager. I mean, having no friends and
we've terrible reports. Yeah, I think it's been hard. We're running a generation lockdown campaign in the paper at the moment, which is specifically to deal with kids and how to make life better for them, and not just now. It's in the future. It's in the years to come, I think, and that, as you say, is going to be where I think most efforts have to be concentrated. But
my daughter works with underprivileged kids or endangered kids in danger. She lives in Norway. For children who've been taken away from violent homes or damaging situations, and she said that there's going to be a COVID generation. She said this is a disaster. So
really.
I really feel for her with these suffering. A lot of people are suffering, but Anyway,
okay, just very quickly back to a more cheery subject then, I suppose, which is you said Wimbledon was the only Grand Slam cancelled last year, probably because of their insurance. But anyway, it was tough timing for them as well. But it's back this year. Are you looking forward to it? Are the players looking forward to it?
I think we're all dying to get back to Wimbledon. We're a bit nervous about what sort of protocols or whatever it is. For me, it's going to be a little bit bittersweet because I'm finally able to get back to the UK, but we're in bubbles, so I can't sleep in my own bed. So I'm going to go the lead-up tournaments. There's various lead-up tournaments. Obviously, Queen's for the men and Eastbourne, Birmingham for the women. We're all in the hotels. And then when it comes to Wimbledon, one of the things that I enjoyed most of all was being able to stay at home, and that was one of the reasons why I think I had success. Because stay in a place where we feel comfortable. Obviously, we can't do that this year, so everybody's in a hotel. We're all back to the bubble again, and it doesn't matter who you are. You're Roger Federer, Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, Serena Williams, whoever. Doesn't matter how many Grand Slams you've won. You're in that hotel. And so, in many ways, it's kind of cool. You say hi, but I don't know if Federer can afford to hire out the whole floor. Probably can get a giant suite that might be a bit more comfortable than other players who've got a small room. And it's going to be interesting. But we do. To get back at that club and the grass, and Wimbledon do a really great job. I mean, they will do a fantastic job at this, and that's one of the benefits of being a club, is they can do things that associations will, take a long time and effort to do. As a private club, they can go, right, boom, right, we'll do this, and we'll block this off, and we'll have this, and we'll move that to there, and they'll make it happen. And I think the players will say, hey, this is pretty cool. And also they've had other 3 Grand Slams to look at and go, okay, what worked, what didn't work? Hey, what worked at the French Open? What worked at the Australian Open? And what and some of the officials came out. Obviously they couldn't, some of the lockdown, but they came out and they had a look to say, okay, what worked? And they're all in communication, so they'll make it happen. Federer's, he's going to be back playing. Maybe I dare to say that it might be his goodbye, and maybe Andy Murray's goodbye tournament as well. What a way to finish at Wimbledon after a couple of years out. And the other players, Djokovic isn't as impervious as he seems to be as usual. So there's some options there. There's opportunities for young guns that are coming through. The young guns have finally come through, and. On the women's side, well, anybody can win it. So that's and she's been practicing. I saw her today. She's hitting the ball well and looking pretty fit. So she's keen. She wants to break that record.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Do you think she might?
I think she might, but it's whether her body can hold up over 6 matches. If she gets a bit of an easy run for a few rounds, then I think she could be. Well, she's certainly dangerous. There's a really open, certainly from the women's side. Anybody can win it, as we've seen over the last few years. Anybody who runs hot can win a slam.
Yeah. Okay, well that's great. Well, thanks so much for your time, Pat. I think we've covered most of the tennis. I won't take up too much of your time. I will quickly ask you which bit, just about the music. Have you been managing to do much on the music front, or? I
am dying to get my hands on my guitar. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to obviously see much or do much, but I did get in Australia. That was a great thing. I did go to see a bit of a concert, and happened to be two days in a row in Adelaide. Bizarre situation where we weren't allowed out, but the stadium is actually connected to the tennis stadium. So the football field is connected. The Adelaide Oval, for those sports fanatics who know about the test, was actually connected. So we could go in to the tennis bubble, and then they got us a corporate booth where the players could sit. We could sit and we could watch the concert. It was on there. We couldn't go into the public, but it was great. It was a Led Zeppelin copy band who were pretty good.
Yeah,
and probably my favorite band of all time. But it was great to see that. But I think we all want a bit of live music, don't we?
Yeah, I think return to normal sooner rather than later would be welcomed by all, I suspect.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, look, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And it's been fascinating to hear what you guys have all been through, and very best of luck. It's for I was going to say the French next, but you've got...
Just about, yeah. We've got a couple of lead-up tournaments and then the French Open. The next big one's the French, yeah.
So best of luck in that, and obviously best of luck at Wimbledon.
Thank you, and then we'll see you, we won't see you. It'll be straight after that. We'll be back to the UK on the grass.